Everyone, our next talk is by Eric Lee. He's traveled all the way from Kansas City to be with us today. He's going to be talking about IT burnout. So here's Eric.
Thank you. Okay, so, pictures, crazy. This is going to be a different talk than you've probably seen in most conferences. This is not going to be a technical talk in any way, shape, or form. So just be aware that it's non-technical, number one, and number two, this is going to be my story about me. You may be able to take things from it, but that'll vary depending on who you are and where you're at in life. Okay? So, about me. Again, my name's Eric Lee. I've been in IT for a little over 25 years. My friends always call me the weird person in IT because I'm not into sci-fi, Lord of the Rings, any of that stuff like that. So when they start talking about Star Trek, I just kind of like tone deaf and glazed over look. I go to a lot of dirt track races and build things and do other things like that. So that's what I'm into. All right, what we're here for. IT burnout. How many people have heard about IT burnout much over the last couple of years? Yeah. There you go. So I'd written this presentation a couple years ago. I submitted it to about 6 conferences. I got turned down for all of them. And I was like, this sucks. So I said, after about 4 or 5 beers one night, I said, screw it. I banged out a blog post on it, sent it over to a friend and was like, what do you think about this? And they were like, this needs to be in the community. So I hit submit with my fingers shaking to post and closed my laptop and went to bed. Next day I had a ton of responses and everybody saying, we should be talking about this stuff. And I'm like, well, that's funny because none of the conferences want me to, so I don't know what to do. So I went through burnout a couple times, but I never really thought about it when it happened because burnout was never talked about in the community for about the first 15 years that I was in IT. I'd heard about it twice. A couple people in the community committed suicide. We talked about it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then it just disappeared, right? Like a lot of other topics that we deal with. So when I was going through burnout, I had no idea at first that's what it was, right? It was not around. We didn't talk about it, so I had no idea. But after going through it twice, I think about it every day, right? It's something I have to stay on top of so I don't go through it again. I would normally say right now we don't talk about it enough in the community, but we're getting better at it. If you haven't noticed, the Mental Health Village over here has phenomenal information about burnout and mental health over there too. So please stop by, look at their literature, talk to somebody if you need to. Even though we're doing this, we still need to do a better job. Mental health, soft skills, stuff like this is no different than the technical skills that we're learning at this conference. We need to be helping out each other, make sure everybody's aware of what's going on, look out for each other, and help them through it. So, this is my journey through IT burnout, starting when I was little. So a little background information. I grew up in a busy family. I had 2 brothers, a ton of cousins, almost all boys. My parents got married when they were 18, had my older brother when they were 19, myself when they were 21. I spent most of my time hanging around family and friends, riding bikes, skateboarding, playing kick the can. Anybody kick the can? Yeah, missed that game. And BB gun wars. Lots of BB gun wars. We were what they called free range kids. Anybody else? Yeah? Just be home before the lights come on or else you get your butt beat, right? My parents were working all the time, so we were just kind of running around doing whatever we could to kill time. As I got older, my things changed that I did. Best friend, I helped build that race car in the top left, your left, from the ground up. We borrowed his dad's flatbed truck, went and bought it at the junkyard, and we did everything but put the roll cage in it. I played baseball, I played golf, I played on a competitive traveling soccer team. We went all over the Midwest. My parents, as I said, worked a bunch of hours. They tried to make it to our events what they could, but they couldn't make it to all of them. We weren't poor by any means, but we didn't have a lot of money either. I vividly remember going to the grocery stores a couple times with my mom My brother's in tow, and we couldn't check out because her check wouldn't clear. So we got by, but we didn't have the money to always go to the doctor and go do all these other things. After high school, I moved to Kansas City to play college soccer. I'm completely on my own now, physically, mentally, and financially. My dad gave me $20 for gas and said, "Good luck, son." 2 years playing soccer, my parents saw one of my college soccer games. But not only did I go to school full-time, in order to pay for this, I had to work full-time. 1 year, I even had 11 W-2s. That's how busy I was. On top of playing soccer, I also held executive positions in the fraternity I was in. I was busy all the time. Sometimes I don't even remember when I slept, but I was busy. Had to do what I had to do to survive and to get done. In the jobs I was working, most of them were in the IT field. So to me, just being busy isn't IT burnout. After college, I spent 4 years doing a back-end systems integration for the company I worked at. Our company was bought out by another one in Finland. So I was in charge of all the Americas. So I did, across 5 companies, back-end systems integration for Active Directory and some other things. And then after those first 2 years, I actually got to do it globally. So someone from the Midwest who vacation was going to your grandparents' house in the next town over, going to Finland, going to Sweden, going to Australia, Sao Paulo, all these other places was awesome. I traveled over 80% of the time those 4 years. Some weeks when we were doing cutovers, I worked 90 hours that week, even more. Okay? Lots of long hours. I felt the stress of getting the job done that week, but nothing that didn't go away, once we were done with that. We got that site done, you could breathe, you'd come back, you'd have a few days to get caught up before you would go to the next one or what have you. It was a lot of work, and there was some stress. But I still enjoyed other activities that I did with my other friends when I actually had time. So to me, just working long hours by itself isn't IT burnout. The only thing that is constant is change. This has been around for quite a while, and this is kind of where things started taking a shift. During the last year of that long project I was on, and then the following 2 years, there was a hugely noticeable change in the company I worked at, specifically in our team. None of our internal customers were happy with us anymore. None of our projects were getting fully funded. We were losing good teammates that were leaving to go somewhere else. And in general, our overall morale was just down. People weren't happy. I wasn't happy because projects weren't getting funded. In the manufacturing company I worked at, the manufacturing side of the company were hiring their own IT staff to make up for it. And on top of that, they put in their own switches, their own servers, and everything else right next to ours. It was ridiculous. By this time, I'd worked there 11 years. And my boss at the time had been my boss for about 6 years. He just really didn't care. He's like, well, that's great. It's less work we have to do. This is awesome, right? I implemented a ton of the improvements over the years that were there. I really felt like I was a part of the company. But I was pissed off at my boss. I really hated him, okay? I wanted to do even more for the company. But my boss was an idiot. But to me, not liking my boss or that job or that company by itself is not IT burnout. I didn't know how much stress and everything else that was going on with this and my boss and some of the other things during this time until I was watching TV with my wife one day. And I can still remember this vividly. It was in the basement, downstairs to the left, sitting on the couch, watching TV. I can't tell you what's on the TV because I had no idea. I was so engulfed in what I was doing, thinking about work and everything else, I don't remember what was on the TV. But my wife, I can still picture it. She asked me, "What are you thinking about?" And I'm like, "Why?" She said, "Look at your hand." And my left hand is just shaking like tremors. Like I've had Parkinson's for 15 years or something like that. And I was like, oh, crap. There it is. Something's going on, right? we started talking about how I felt, what I was thinking about, how I physically felt, stuff like that. And it became obvious that I couldn't even watch TV without fixating on what was going on at work. As we talked over the next few days, there was other symptoms that came about. I speak sarcasm as a primary language. Anybody else? Yep, there you go. Sarcasm usually, you're right on that line of being snarky, right? That can go bad versus the sarcasm. Well, I didn't tiptoe that line. I jumped in with both feet when I was in that well, and I didn't realize it until my wife brought it up. I was extremely snarky to the point where I was just being mean about stuff that didn't matter at all, like leaving a jacket out or something like that. I was never physically mean or anything like that to her, but just these snide little comments all the time. Other things, I hated going to the movies anymore. I hated paying money to go to a movie that when it was over, I couldn't remember anything that actually happened because I'm thinking about work, right? The other thing is I would play free cell, for hours and have no idea how many games I won or lost. You're just clicking, right? Have you ever seen that meme was it Homer? He found the end of the internet. I would just be searching through the internet at times and have no idea what I was looking for or what I looked at. So in essence, I was wrapped up so much into my work that I wasn't looking out for my own mental and physical health. My wife had seen a lot of these signs, but we never really talked about them. And part of that is back to how I was brought up as a free-range kid with mostly boys doing mostly stupid stuff. We never talked about our feelings, ever. My wife, on the other hand, is from almost all females, and they still to this day talk at least once a day about what's going on about everything in life. So it's really hard to get somebody who wants to talk about everything and somebody who wants to talk about absolutely nothing to actually talk about feelings together. It's kind of like getting people that like VMs to talk to people who like Kubernetes, right? It's the same thing. So I didn't know what else to do. I know I didn't want to be at the company anymore, but I also didn't want to leave because I'd been there for so long and done all of that. But I was burned out on the job, the situation, the tech that was there, the amount of hours I was putting in, all of it. So what did I do? Well, not much, actually, or could be a lot, depending on who you are and how you feel about things. I just changed jobs. That fixes everything, right? After spending some time reflecting, I was like, I just got to go. Luckily, it didn't take long for me to find a new job, and within 2 weeks of starting my new job, the shaking went completely away. When I was at home, my wife was like, dang, there you are again. I know this person, right? But what did I actually change? Nothing. Nothing at all. Well, actually, not nothing, but very, very close, right? So started a new job, was there about 3.5 years, had a lot of the same things I had at my previous job. We merged with another company, more integrations, long hours. I had to get rid of Lotus Notes. Puke. Very stressful projects. The company I worked at was in the marketing advertising area. It was 2008. Recession. Budget cuts. Again, But through all of this, I didn't have any of the shaking. I didn't have the excessive snarkiness. I didn't have any of that stuff. So I had absolutely no symptoms of IT burnout. And then one day, I'm out shoveling the driveway, and the guy across the street's like, hey, I'm looking for somebody that knows all this stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm interested. He's like, yeah, we're trying to do a CI/CD journey. I need to automate all this stuff. We don't know how to do it. I'm like, sweet, that's right up my alley. Let's go do it. So I took this other job, and it was awesome. Free reign to do whatever we wanted, to take a manual process of building and testing code and completely automated it. So they would do 5 builds a week and test it for a full stack and report on it. Within about 4 or 5 months, we got it down to automated no-touch testing every 12 hours of about 150 tests. And from that point on, it just grew and grew and grew. It was the best job I ever had because 50% of my job was to go to conferences, look at software, look at processes, do whatever we can to make this process better and faster. The VP of our company was full on, like he understood that this was going to make our software better, you know, customers happier, everything like that. It was awesome. The most challenging part of the job was every year we had a client conference, and I was in charge of the lab infrastructure for them to run stuff on. I didn't have to do the content of the labs, but I had to have the lab front end and the back end stuff as well too. And it usually took about 3 to 4 months to get that all set up and working. One year, we were having problems with the cloud vendor getting their stuff working right, and it was Thursday, and the conference starts on Monday. And we're doing the conference in Orlando. And my coworker, he looked over at me and he was like, "Hey, dude, are you all right?" I'm like, why? And he goes, "Look at your hand." And I started shaking again. So I looked down at it, and it was probably about a fifth as bad as it was previously before. Luckily, I kind of remembered most of the symptoms I've had the last time. So I took a step back, looked at all the other symptoms. I wasn't being snarky. I enjoyed hanging out with friends. I enjoyed going to the movies, enjoyed a lot of that stuff. So I didn't think I was in burnout this time. After we arrived in Orlando a few days later, I called the vendor. We ran another test. Everything worked successfully. Yay! Right? 30 minutes later, look down, my hand's not shaking anymore. So I just racked that up to stress. Should I have probably gone to a doctor? Yeah. But let's go back and think about, you know, where I came from. We didn't talk about our feelings. We didn't go to the doctor. We didn't talk to doctors about our feelings. Yeah, you know people like this, right? Yeah, same kind of deal. So even though I had some physical stuff, I related it to mental stuff. And in our realm, you don't go to the doctors for mental stuff or physical stuff unless it can't be cured with duct tape and paper towels. Super glue. All right, so, So during this time, I was been recruited by a reseller that I'd known for a while. I never really wanted to go over there because I didn't like some of the management. At this time, there was about 5 people that I'd worked with at a previous company that were there, and they're like, "It's different. Come on over. It's great. You know, we've changed." So I was trying to decide if I should stay at the best job I ever had or should I go to this other place. Pros and cons, I could go help some other companies, you know, would be great. I could learn new things about how the other places do it. I thought it'd be awesome. So, and it worked last time, right? To change jobs. Like, let's just do this again. So I changed jobs. And the first 9 months, it was awesome. Met a lot of people, loved my customers, most of them. It was awesome. And then all of a sudden, after 9 months, some practices came back or showed up that I didn't like. Some weird things that I didn't think were, I don't know how to put it. Like, I just didn't agree with them, like sharing data that shouldn't be shared to the sales staff or what have you. And then I got blasted by the CEO of the company to the whole entire sales team for 2 things that I had nothing to do with. And when it was finally shown to him that I had nothing to do with it, he just kind of blew me off like, "Oh, no big deal. You know, he's just a peon. It shouldn't matter." And there was no retractions then out. It was awful. Like, the crappy part of the company had come back, and I just, you know, had to go. But before I could even get out of there, I lost half my account managers as they hired somebody else in another area. That part of the company, or those account managers, accounted for roughly 60% of my quota. If anybody in sales, if you don't know, your salary is very small. And most of your money comes from your bonuses from getting your quota. So now I've lost the potential to even make quota because they didn't readjust my compensation package after losing them. So there was no way I could even remotely provide for my family like I would able to before. Yeah. On top of all this, I left the best job I ever had in my life, And now I have a wife and 2 kids. So not only am I not being able to provide for myself, but my wife and 2 kids the way I was before. Every time I needed to work on tasks, before I left, I would catch myself repeatedly thinking about that last job I had. And I just couldn't let it go. I faded into some depression. Previous symptoms all came back. The good news this time is I was able to recognize the symptoms. I took a different job with another company in an area where I wasn't excited to be, but I had to get out of where I was at just to get away from those terrible people. The problem is that a couple of my good friends, when I talked to them about taking this job, they told me not to do it. Don't go there. So one of the things I had set in the back of my head this whole time is the "I told you so," right? That's one of the worst things ever. And I didn't want to hear it. Because of that, I closed off myself. I didn't go to social activities with them. I stayed out of the community. I did a lot of things. I quit doing a lot of things I used to do before. So changing jobs again didn't make me happy. And honestly, like I alluded to earlier, it never did. I was still depressed. Every day I would see somebody from the old organization where I was at before, because we were in the same area of town, and it would just remind me that I left the best job I ever had for the worst job I ever had. My window where I sat looked right at the old building where I was at. So it was dang near impossible to get anything done. I was in burnout again, full depression, full everything else, and I couldn't get myself out. So let's talk about a couple things real quick. I've stated some things that you've heard in the past, that working long hours is burnout. Just don't work long hours and you won't be burnt out. Okay? That's not it. So that and some of the others, what is IT burnout to me? To me, it's any combination of these areas that are being far enough, quote unquote, out of whack, that leaves you exhausted day after day to the point that you stop doing the things that you normally do. Does that make sense? So for some people, it might be 1 or 2 of these. For other people, it's all of these. It's going to be different for everybody. But for me, it was pretty much all of them. And what's different about burnout in IT versus just depression, right? Because some people have asked me, "Hey, Eric, you're just depression. Why is this IT burnout?" Well, I think IT can be different in some areas, right? We're always connected and have been before the rest of the world was really always connected. We're always trying to keep up with new technologies, new methods, new stuff like that. There's always more and more and more. A lot of times now, we don't even get breaks between projects, right? When I was in IT years ago, you would have a project, and then when you're done, you would at least have a couple weeks, or if not 4, before you started working on the next big project. You'd have some smaller stuff. But now it seems like you're not even halfway done with one, and you're starting the next one, and then the first one never gets done because you don't have enough time to finish it, and you're just in this constant cycle of chasing your tail, right? Sometimes it's the repetitive work, the monotonous clicking the same thing over and over and over again, right? Having no real buy-in to what you're doing. The constant firefighting in some places, right? You never can get ahead because, like I said earlier, constant firefighting. And then sometimes it's just supporting those crappy old legacy systems they just suck, right? All right. One more thing to talk about right now. Let's talk about the suicide, because I'm guessing at least one person here is thinking, he hasn't said anything about suicide. There's no way he went through IT burnout. Well, let's talk about that. Not everyone who has burnout or depression automatically goes to suicide. I'll be candidly honest. I thought about suicide. I thought about it multiple times. The number of hours I thought about it could fill up a couple months. I set my car in parking lots thinking about it, staring up at the sky, not going home to my wife and kids, thinking about it'd be better off for me to not be here. The reality is, for me, The way I thought about it is sometimes when we think about taking one of those exotic trips to some island that you can only see by zooming all the way into it, right, on Google Earth, I thought about it a lot, about not being around, but I never thought about exactly how I would do it and where I would do it or anything like that. I never thought about what airplane I would have to take to get there or what boat I'd have to then take or any of that other stuff. So, not specifically thinking about all that, doesn't mean that you have not been in burnout or in severe enough depressive state that you need to look at help. All right. Time to move forward, right? Why am I here now talking about this? How did I get there? So, I have some friends that I meet with regularly, and they noticed I was in a bad state, and they would try to talk to me and all this stuff, right? But as I said before, we never talked about our feelings. You know, heck, by this time in my life, my dad has only told me he was proud of me twice ever. You know, and this is only 6 years ago. So, and I'm not young. That's kind of how I was brought up. So we never talked about feelings. But talking to my friends and my peers felt easier because I felt that you guys working in IT can relate. Versus talking to my wife who doesn't work in IT, she would have no idea, right? So it was getting easier to talk to them. But talking didn't automatically, make me stop obsessing about leaving the best job I ever had, right? I just couldn't stop obsessing about it. So one day I'm out with a friend who doesn't work in IT, and we're at the bar just sitting there having a couple drinks after work, and I'm staring directly through the TV again, and he's chirping on about something, probably golf or something stupid. And finally he was like, "Hey dude, what's going on?" I'm like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "What are you thinking about? What's going on? You're not being a good friend here. What's happening?" So after a while, I finally gave in. I told him how I ruined my life by leaving the best job I ever had for the worst job I ever had, and now I can't get the best job I ever had back, and I'm never going to find another one, and I'm a loser, and I'm dumb, yada, 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 yada. And you know what? This is what he said. Sometimes you need that friend to just give you that little kick in the rear end. You know what I mean? Sometimes the touchy-feely stuff is great for certain areas, and sometimes you need somebody to just kick you where you need to be kicked. So, how did I get out of this? I needed a strategy. I started with 1, and I worked my way up to 6, but I needed to figure out ways to combat this to where it didn't happen again no matter where I worked and what kind of environment I worked in. So let's go through these 6. Support system. First off, I had to get rid of the idiots I hung around with that all they did was complain all the time about how bad their life is in every single way, shape, or form. Now, I was doing that myself, so this was hard because I had to look at some of them and decide, you're just an idiot and I don't need to be around you anymore because you're negative all the time, and you're going through the other hand is you're going through the same stuff I'm going through. We need to help each other out and move forward. And that one was really hard. These people, I had to make sure that they had my back as much as I'm willing to have their back. And if they're not willing to be there for me when I really need them, then I probably don't need that in my life. The other thing I had to do with this is talk to my boss. And this is extremely, extremely, extremely difficult. Luckily, I had a pretty good boss at the time. My current boss, well, he just left yesterday, so it sucks. But he's awesome. Both of those, we talk about what triggers my depression. I like to fix everything on my own. And sometimes I'll get stuck fixating on the problem for days and days and days and days and days and days and days. Anybody else? Yeah? Yeah. And then you kind of get that tunnel vision, and then you find yourself slipping into that, spot. And my boss, I'm like, listen, if you see me doing that, just kick me, let's figure out how to get this solved or something like that. The other thing is I had to talk to him about how I like criticism, right? And how I like to be rewarded. Everybody likes to have rewarded the recognition in different ways. So I really had to talk about how I like that versus the other. The next thing I had to do was get organized. I'd been complaining to my wife for a while about shared calendars. She's a teacher. She likes her paper calendar. And I'm like, this does not work. I don't know when the kids' activities are. I don't know what's going on. So I got her on board, and now she loves it. The other thing I do is Inbox Zero. It's called the Zenardic, I can't pronounce it, effect. I've got a link to a great blog post about it later. And it's about how you're constantly thinking about things that you don't have done, and you can't focus on the things that you need to work on. So if your inbox has like 1,000 things in it, you're constantly reviewing as you're spinning through the other stuff, and it makes your mind wander versus what you need to be working on and getting it done and going to the next thing, right? So I organize my email through a deal called Inbox Zero, and I have a link at the end for that as well too. And then I use Todoist on my phone, and I keep track of work items and home items. So my honey-to-do list is on there, and my work list is on there. Great thing about it is you can see how many tasks you've completed, and you can say, yay me, right? And it emails you every day, or you can set up your notifications on how you have stuff to do. All right? I have some links to that stuff at the end. The third thing, this is hard, especially with wife and kids. You have to make time for yourself. You have to talk to your partner and make them understand that I need some time for myself. Right now, I like to go to the races, Chili Bowl. I actually 2 weeks ago got to drive a sprint car. It was awesome. 10 laps. I like building things. I turned that Golden Tee into a Raspberry Pi arcade. So hooked into the hap switch and all that stuff. It was pretty fun. A part of making time for yourself is also making time for you and your spouse and taking my vacation days. We went with three other couples and spent a week down in Mexico and enjoyed ourselves. And I came back and went to work the very next day, and it was awesome. Like, I didn't need a vacation from the vacation. All right, fourth. This one's awesome. Positive reflection. A lot of us will get into that drive about how we're terrible, right? And if you take a step, take 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and you look at where you came from and where you're at now, there's a lot of things that we've achieved that just get tucked back in there, and then you never think about them again. For me, I think about, like I talked about earlier, I'm the first person in my family to go to a 4-year college. That's something I should be proud of. I shouldn't, forget about that stuff, right? Think about certifications, projects, stuff like that. It kind of seems a little shallow too, but sometimes I'll look through my followers and there's some very nice, there's some very popular, people with a lot of followers that will actually talk to me at times. I'm like, holy shit, I must be doing something right, but it seems a little shallow, but it makes me feel good that, somebody who they actually care what I think. And then I keep a folder and I put things in there, screenshots, copies of emails, stuff like that, where I've received things from other people. I have stuff from last jobs that I've worked at where I finished a project and somebody has said, hey, Eric, thanks for this. You did a great job. We couldn't have got this done without you. Yes, I'm saving that into my folder for review later, right? Fifth, I volunteer. I volunteered at multiple different places, but I had to pick one place that I really wanted to do. One of my friends in college, he co-founded Team Rubicon. So I go and help after disaster relief through Team Rubicon. I spent 8 days down in Houston 2 years ago after the hurricane. I just did tornado work in Lawrence, Kansas a few months ago. We do service projects, do stuff like that. It's great. I've got a blog post from 2017 about what that experience looked like. Because if you think you have it bad, and then you go see people living in a tent city that have lost everything, your perspective on life changes pretty darn fast, and it'll stick with you. All right. The last thing I do is what I'm doing right now. I reach out to others, okay? Share my story. If I see people that I think need help, I talk to them. I don't take no for an answer if I really believe they need help. I get to know them, stuff like that. Some people are going to just tell you to go jump off a cliff. You'll be able to tell by their responses and stuff like that on if they really need help or not. It's something that is very hard to do. It takes time to work on. You really got to try to get to know people and techniques on how to communicate with them. Why is this important? Because you'll get some things back out of it too. I was having a horrible day one day. I'd just been talking to a company, and I was having a really actually bad week. One of the projects I was on wasn't going well. My manager was being a pain in the rear and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden I got a direct message on Twitter from somebody that had said, hey, I heard you talked with our company. You know, my exec said you were awesome. You know, hands down, if I could put you on my team, yada, yada, yada. You know, I'd love to down the road. I was like, wow, you know, like they actually like me, you know. And then later that year, a friend in the community that I'd talked to off and on, we'd talked to about challenges we'd been through personally. I just texted him a picture of my family's Christmas card. So I did. It's like, hey, Steve, you know, I hope you have a good Christmas. You know, here's a picture of our family, you know, go there. And all of a sudden I get a tweet back to me like that. And I was actually having a horrible day that day I got that. Just lifted up my day, lifted up the rest of my weekend, made me feel good too. Take the time to do the little things. Take the time to recognize people for doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Don't be afraid. It's worth the little amount of time. The first time I gave this presentation last year, I was nervous as all could be. I barely made it through it. I got home that night, and this was in my email. If you don't think it's worth it, it's extremely worth it. You could help that one person that then can help the one person that could then help the one person. So I get stuff like this quite often given this presentation. This is my 18th time giving this presentation, and I have it scheduled 2 more times next month. One last thing that I've learned over time giving this is, what can managers do if you're a manager? Here's some things you can do. How many people know what resources your company have for you if you need to go talk to somebody? 1. Yes. 2. So I didn't know that both of the times I was going through this, my actually benefits included therapy sessions for free. Yours may too. If you're a manager or not, check into things like that. But especially if you're a manager, know in case one of your employees comes up to you. Know the reporting policy. Again, some of the things I talked about before, the praise communication. Look at task and workload distribution. Don't give somebody the same task over and over and over again, especially if it's a crappy one. Spread that out. All right. In conclusion, your company isn't going to solve this for you. You are going to be responsible for your own well-being in this area. So look for symptoms in yourself and others. Figure out strategies that work for you. I've taken some things away, like working out. It's terrible. I try to add it back sometimes, but it sucks. But don't give up. Like I said, I've worked in and out of multiple strategies. Those 6 that are over there now are the ones I do now. And lastly, pay it forward. You never know who needs it or who you might help from reaching out. Lastly, the World Health Organization, if you hadn't noticed earlier this year, they're actually recognizing burnout. It's being added into their list of diagnoses. It'll be published in January 2022. So if you see the characterized by 3 dimensions at the bottom, energy depletion, exhaustion, oh yeah, you know, mental disease from one's jobs, the negativism, oh, cynicism, yeah, it's a peer of sarcasm, and reduced professional efficacy. All right. Last but not least, I put a QR code up here, so if you want to download the slide deck, you can get it from that QR code. There's some good resources up here. If you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. If you want to talk to me, I'm on Twitter. I'm not hard to find. Check with your insurance provider. If you prefer talking to somebody in person, there's a phone number. If you prefer texting, there's a phone number. If you prefer reading, there's a website or 2. The OS Mental Illness, that Twitter account has books, digital books for you, for managers, for stuff like that. Technically, you can get it for free or you can donate a little money so they can keep doing it. They're very, very good. I have all 3 of them. If you want to see more sessions like this, Sonia Cuff put together a big old list on that top one right there of other presentations, both in video and in text form. See why I can't pronounce that? Does anybody know how to pronounce that? Zeigarnik effect? That's the one where you have a problem focusing if you have too much stuff. And then how to fix that? Inbox 0. It's great. And then there's 3 other of my friends that have posted similar sessions since I started giving this, if you want to read other people's journeys as well too. And with that, I'm here for you all, and I'm done. So thank you for having me. Anybody? No? No? All right. If you want to talk, or anything, just hit me up outside or out over here or wherever else. So.